what we talked about last week on the show in terms of, being corrected and seeing that your art could be elevated to another level if someone is just there to critique your art. Not criticize it, but critique it. And learning how to separate that critique from your ego so that you can meet the standards of what creativity currently is. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Terry Mugler and a lot of the looks that he does, you can go back to a lot of 90s fashion, and you can see that the look that she was giving in terms of the tightly curled bob and the heavy black eye makeup is very on par with the Mugler brand. I think where a lot of people had a problem was the tanning was excessive. And then to not take ownership of it and say, oh no, it's not tanning. It was lighting. It's like you don't want to say that, yeah, I copied y'all's style. I did. I copied y'all's style. And instead of, yes, Kim Kardashian is letting a myriad of people, assisting in letting a myriad of people out of jail, which is a great look, and we love her for it. We love to see it. But I think that all of that said and done, wrong is wrong, and for those of you who are going to say shit, which this was eloquently put by Amanda Seales, but for those of you who are going to say shit like, well, Black women wear long European weaves. Well, that is the beauty of being a Black woman, is that we in fact come in different flavors. So our hair being straight is not a liken or akin to us jockeying the styles of European. We actually come in that flavor as well, where some of our hair is actually straight. And for those of us who don't have straight hair, we have no problem with saying, hey, this is a Malaysian, this is a European, whatever, this is a whatever. Like, there's no problem with doing that. And let's keep in mind that any adjustments that you see to African American women wanting to liken themselves to the look of a European woman, you guys created that standard. You created that standard. So you can't say that the standard that you created is what, and we adopt, is something that is bad for us. We don't get to create a standard, because when you guys jock our style, it's seen as groundbreaking and cutting edge. But on us, it's seen as ghetto. And until the Kardashian sisters are able to come to terms with that, I've got to agree with what the general public seems to think about this shoot. By the way, Camila fucking Cabello, she is Euro-Cuban, if I'm not mistaken. Young Euro-Cuban Cabello had a lot to say in the past about people of color, huh? Well, I like that stupid song, Savannah, but I only like it because of the damn commercial. I've never been into her. From the moment that Blue Ivy told me to calm down with the clapping on her, I knew that I wasn't going to be here for it. So Camila Cabello can get the gas face. I think that's all we have this week in Savannah. He's a good man. So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back, and we are going to set the table this week, and we're setting the table for your spirit. That's right. We'll be right back.
While every shelter pet is unique, some love a good game of fetch, while others, like myself, would just rather snuggle together on the couch. However, there is one thing that they all have in common. They're all pure love. Right now, millions of pets in shelters and rescues across the country are waiting to be adopted. Did you know that only 44% of dogs and 47% of cats in American homes come from animal shelters and rescue groups? If you're thinking about getting a pet this holiday season, make sure to visit the shelterpetproject.org, brought to you by the Ad Council, Maddie's Fund, and the Humane Society of the United States.
All right, and we are back. All year, as I previously discussed, we have been talking about mindfulness on this show, and all things concerning one's spiritual path as it pertains to sex, power, enlightenment, mental, emotional health, and unconscious motivations on that path. So I wanted to bring to light to you as we round up this year that something was brought to my attention this week that I never even thought about. But I know that we're all familiar with the term STDs, but we've always associated that term with sexually transmitted diseases. But here's something for you guys that will provide an aha moment. Have you ever heard of spiritually transmitted diseases? All right, well, that is an actual thing. Spiritually transmitted diseases can either arise within you organically or can be passed on to you by someone who already carries this disease, so to speak. These diseases infiltrate the mind, where they take root in our psychology. Then they start to rule over our thoughts and govern our energy field. They completely take over us to the point that we don't even realize that we have them anymore. And unfortunately, these diseases are not as easy to cure as an actual physical disease. There's no pill or chemical solution that, and to be cured of these diseases, it may require a little bit of self-reflection, a little stillness, as well as a little bit of honesty. So for many of you asking, what would merit a spiritual transmitted disease? Well, one of them, for instance, is called the fluffy bunny syndrome. And that is caused by an unwillingness to face the negative aspects of the world because they are too emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically overwhelming. So they don't block out negatives. They don't block out the negative because they don't believe that the negative exists. This isn't the case of the fluffy bunny syndrome. Nor do they block it out because they think it's a waste of time. Someone who suffers with the FBS, as it's also known as, they will block out negative aspects of the world because they don't know how to manage the emotional and spiritual implications that come with facing negatives. So, for example, someone who will refuse to believe that their government would go to war on another country for economic and political gain because of how overwhelming the impact is on their worldview and their feeling of security and comfort, right? The symptoms include a willful ignorance, naivete, emotional and mental instability, fear, and delusion. In those cases, most of the people with FBS would rather convince themselves that something else is going on because it makes them feel more comfortable and more safe. Those with FBS can be cured by facing the darkness, being honest with themselves, and using their tendency towards positivity to transmute the darkness in something new. By learning to face and accept parts of the inner and outer worlds that we don't like, you will learn to turn your fear into positive action instead of positive ignorance. Make the darkness conscious and utilize it as fuel for passion for your positivity. Now, another level of spiritual transmitted disease is called the backdoor ego. Now, the backdoor ego is a STD that arises when people obtain too much spiritual knowledge without having done enough self-work. Now, doing the self-work is pretty hard, but too much information and not enough wisdom is a recipe for disaster. When talking to people who have this disorder, even when you're talking about in terms of spiritual philosophy, you may notice that they want to put more emphasis on their correctness actually than the issue at hand. They want you to know that they know what they're talking about. So basically, when you're having a discussion with someone and the backdoor syndrome comes up, they will want to turn the light of the conversation back around onto them to glorify themselves. Let's say you are talking with them about how awesome your recent meditation session was, right? And you told them, hey, I went for a guided meditation. It was really cool, whatever. And then they said, they'll say something like, yeah, man, I told you so. You already know that. That's what I've been saying this whole time. Right? They're basically taking the attention away from the topic of conversation and investing it into the role they played at arriving at an answer. They're doing this only to massage their own ego and their own sense of self-worth. So, what are symptoms of someone who has the backdoor ego disorder? Well, they're oftentimes argumentative, they're passive aggressive, they're boastful, they're proud, they're competitive. They tend to be pretentious, self-intentioned. They tend to be comparative and also judgmental. Now, if you are wondering what the cure is for this, that one is a pretty hard fight. The cure for this is in two parts. The first part is to practice honest introspective reflection. And so basically what that means is you will need to encourage that person to look within themselves to see that when it comes to mindfulness and the egoic journey, so to speak, that it isn't about who showed you how to get there or anything like that. What it's about is self-introspection to say, hey, that's awesome. Where can we take this next? Right? And then the other part is that you want to encourage the person that if they are able to basically adopt a proper spiritual practice, they can get a sense of adequacy and security from that. So you don't need security and validation from getting people to say, hey, you were right about this or you were right about that. That basically goes hand in hand with proper spiritual practices. And that is the simple cure for deep inadequacy and insecurity. Last, but certainly not least, is the idea that there is a dogmatic spiritual dysfunction. Now, what does that mean? That's when people tend to believe that the beliefs that they hold in their mind is what makes them more spiritual. Believing that we are all one, that crystals have healing powers, or that there is an afterlife, or whatever you believe, because it gives you this kind of false sense of being more spiritually evolved than everyone else. That's a dogmatic approach. Someone who has this will refuse to change their behavior or do internal self-work because they're convinced that what they believe is the truth. Now, when you're having a discussion with someone like this, you may notice that nothing about them has really changed outside of the beliefs that they carry in their head. It's similar to religious fundamentalists. They think that being awake means adopting a new belief system and looking a new way because they think that they have the correct set of beliefs. They feel spiritually superior to everyone else. Well, if you study mindfulness and spirituality, you'll note that in terms of real mindfulness and spirituality, believing that you can somehow be superior to one person or the other goes against the direct principles of being on a spiritual or mindful journey. Just as just as any beliefs that anyone carries can certainly complement one's spiritual journey, spirituality is really about opening up your mind and your heart and interacting with those thoughts and emotions in a new way. It's about creating new relationships with yourself, not filling your head with certain propositions or investing your belief in a series of thoughts.